welcome to another video. I'm really excited about this one because we are actually going to be doing something that I have a very random obsession with. I guess that's the best way I can put it. I have always loved old fairy tales and stuff like that. And as you guys have seen, I really like Alice in Wonderland. In today's video, we are going to be reading some retellings of some favorite childhood stories. They are on the darker side. These are definitely not child-friendly types of retellings. But I'm really excited because I've had my eye on these specific retellings for a while. First book that we're going to be reading in this video is Hooked, and that is by
Emily McIntyre.
So maybe you're right.
I know it's Emily Mick something.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll just go with that. That's probably right.
I hope so.
She has an entire, like, I don't know if it's technically like a series or what it counts as, because I know they're all individual books. You don't have to read them in order. But she has this entire collection of retellings that I've been seeing a lot about, and I've heard a lot of good things. I know that some are darker than others, but I'm really excited to jump into them because, again, we've always really liked retellings. We find them super interesting. And this first one is actually supposed to be a Peter Pan retelling.
I think so.
And so we're following the villain. Basically, the entire thing is that you're following the villains and their love stories. Again, it's dark romance, so I'm a little nervous about that because we normally aren't dark romance girlies. So I'm very curious and also a little nervous to see what makes that differentiation. But obviously, something new to try. We're gonna be reading Hooked, and I'm really excited about it. On to the video. You can hear someone mowing their lawn in the background, so sorry about that. But hi guys, we are starting the vlog now. I feel like all you can hear is that person mowing their lawn. I'm so sorry about it. But Sam just made a startling discovery about
We just read the author's note, and it says that it's not a fantasy or a retelling. And I was like, oh.
I didn't think that it was a fantasy. I thought that it was just a romance. I thought that it was a romance going into it, like that it was just gonna be like real people. But I'm very surprised that she's making such a differentiation between retelling and fractured fantasy, or fractured fairy tale.
An adult fractured fairy tale is what she's calling it.
So fractured fairy tale, what's the difference again? You looked it up.
Fractured fairy tale is a more extensive retelling that explores new angles of the story to create something original. A retelling is a new version of a well-known story. The story is still recognizable, but it's been updated. It's like loosely related,
rather than being like very, very similar. Okay. But that's still fun that it has like little hints of it, so that'll be fun. I think their name, like the girl's name, is still Wendy though. And I'm a little nervous. I honestly, like, obviously never making any sort of judgment at other people's reading taste by any means at all, but we have no understanding of dark romance at all.
This will be interesting.
And so I'm a little nervous because
I don't think we've ever read anything like this, so you'll see our first take.
I'm just concerned with the amount of triggers just from like my own personal history and backstory and baddie things. I feel like I'm a little nervous about being triggered myself, and so I feel like that's my only worry when it comes to dark romance. And then obviously like personal boundaries that I feel I shouldn't cross or would want cross or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like things that make me uncomfortable. I definitely don't ever want to come off like I'm judging anyone else's stuff. I'm just worried that for my own sake that this might be a little too much. So I'll be very honest on if this is something that I would recommend, or if I think that if you have a certain background that you shouldn't read it and stuff like that, because I feel like that's definitely important. So we're gonna read, and this book is on Kindle Unlimited if you have Kindle Unlimited and that's something you'd want to know. I'm actually kind of scared. I am hungry and I'm going to heat myself up some leftover Chinese, and we figured that while I do that, we can update you guys. So take it away.
So we are about to begin chapter 11, right?
Yeah.
We definitely see the darkness. I don't know what I'm saying.
We definitely see the darkness.
The dark romance. Definitely didn't like it.
That is why, right, what just happened is why this is not just Sam's channel, and why
it's your channel. I'm just around. I just hang out here.
We just got to chapter 11. It's definitely a little wild, and I feel like the darkness is here, but in like a non-laughing way, I definitely see where the trigger warnings come in, and I definitely see why this wouldn't be some people's cup of tea, their freaking jam. It's a little overwhelming at certain points just because
Hooked is a very bad boy.
Hook is a bad guy. He's giving kind of like mafia energy.
Yeah.
Is what I would describe what they're like lightly playing at. He's constantly hurting people and like torture kind of stuff. And it's definitely very graphic. So if that's not something that you'd be able to handle, I do not recommend, because it's definitely talking a lot about like gruesome activities, not just
like torture kind
like
of
torture, like very descriptive of like the gore and stuff. So if that's something that you can't handle, I don't recommend, because there's a lot of it. I'm having lo mein, by the way, in case you're wondering. The way that this character is being portrayed as like super alpha male, I have power over you type vibe. He's kind of toxic, and so I'm just kind of getting turned off at the thought of their romance, just because all the red flags are going off of like in my mind. Like if Wendy was my friend, would I say that she should be with him? And I'd be like, no girl, you should run. I think that's where dark romance isn't necessarily something that I should dip too far into. I mean, I definitely feel like I want to keep reading the book. It's not anything to the point where I'd want to stop reading. I just hope that I can still enjoy the romance side of it, even though there are the darker side. I just want him to still be worth rooting for, I guess, even though I know we're not going to root for him. But you know what I'm saying? Where I don't want him to be so awful that there's nothing that would make him desirable.
I hope he ends up being like good enough with her. Because like I know he's still probably gonna stay a villain. Yeah. I just want it to be... Which is
fine. I don't mind him being a villain. I don't mind him being toxic. That's not really the problem. If there isn't a reason for him to be wanted at all, if it's just purely... I guess the problem is if it is only about physical attraction, if that's the only thing that makes him worthwhile is the fact that she likes the way he looks, then like, okay, I don't like that regardless of if it's dark romance or not. If it's only about physical attraction, I'm really not into it. I'm curious to see, because the other books that are in this, not series, but like...
It's like a series,
like... collection is what I keep saying. They're about like different things, so I'm curious to see if those would be interesting. One's about like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Yeah. So like the other ones are, there's like a Lion King one. There's a Wizard of Oz one, I think.
Oh yeah.
I feel like there's another one that I'm forgetting. Our other issue is that Sam wants something, but she doesn't know what she wants. You ever get like that where you're like, oh, I want something, but you don't know what you want? And right now, she doesn't know what she wants. She just knows she doesn't want any Chinese with me. So.
Like, I'm not really hungry. But like, I think I've had already like 3 coffees today.
Yeah, no more problem. I'm having lo mein, white rice, and then there's this like brown gravy that's used for another dish that we don't get. I think it's the egg foo young gravy. That feels right. I have some of that in here. And then we have, what is this?
The pan-fried noodles.
Pan-fried noodles that are normally in Cantonese style chow mein. We're gonna go because this clip is getting extra long. And all I'm gonna do is eat my little food. And it looks like a disaster, so I'm not even gonna show you. You're not gonna wish you had some of this, let me tell you. It doesn't look good. It looks like mush, but it's gonna be fire. I am done with the book. Whoa. We finished. We rated it a 4. And I wish that I had been able to get more clips of us reading it for you guys, but I just feel like when we're reading on our Kindle, it's so hard for me to get good clips because it just looks like I'm scrolling on my phone. And I mean, obviously you guys know what I'm doing, but it just feels weird to me. And then
it doesn't have the same vibe.
It doesn't have the same vibe. It just does not give the same vibe. So I'm gonna need to figure out a way to read books on my phone or on my Kindle and be able to like get aesthetic shots, because it's also hard for me to get footage of the actual like quotes or pages or anything like that without like there being a glare from the screen. So I'm gonna have to figure that out. But we finished the book, rated a 4 like I said. It was definitely entertaining. I'll give it that. It was definitely a lot of, what would you say, love? Like drama?
Yeah.
I would say like drama, twists and turns. It was definitely very heavy on like the mafia aspect. So I never gave like a real understanding with you guys of what everything, like what it was about. But basically you're following Wendy and Hook, but his real name is James. And he is like a mafia type where he has all these people that he's in charge of, and they're running a lot of under the radar businesses, you know, crime lord type vibes. and she is the daughter of upstanding businessmen, and so she's in the light a lot, but is like that good girl, like innocent and does nothing wrong, listens to her dad, all that kind of stuff. And then he's like very typical bad boy. And then in terms of it being like a, what is it, a fractured fairy tale?
Yeah.
It was really fun.
They did it in a good way, actually.
Yes.
Like, I thought it was really well done.
I mean, there were things, but I'm not saying that like the content was fun, because girl was kind of crazy at some points, but like
the way they included
fun.
characters that I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Like, and then even just because it's been a while since I've watched Peter Pan, or anything involved with that, and so trying to remember like, okay, who was this like in the story originally, and trying to like piece it together. I mean, it not necessarily trying to like relate it, but just trying to remember all the references was definitely fun, and it was like a good twist, because it definitely made it gave it like an extra component, I feel. And so I highly recommend, because I feel like her writing style was really good. If you are into dark romances or are willing to try one, I felt like this was more of like a beginner friendly level. The next book that we're going to be reading is Alice by
Christina Henry.
Sam is doing really well at remembering the author's names, and I just don't. This is an Alice in Wonderland retelling, except I don't think this is romance.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. It easily could be, and we could just not know. All I know is that you're following Alice woke up in a hospital and has like these memories of the typical like Wonderland, but it's more like she's in a hospital and these are just like crazy girl flashes is what she's experiencing. That should be super interesting. We're gonna start reading that tomorrow because it's getting kind of late. We'll see you tomorrow. Look who the cat dragged in. The plan is, once Sam is done eating, we're going to read her book. She's gonna listen to it because she doesn't have, you don't have the ebook of it, right? That toast that I showed earlier, I'm gonna highlight that thing. Sam has an unhealthy attachment to it. I showed it to her when she was in college. We both were in college, but when she was away at school and I was going to visit her, and it quickly became a problem.
I could eat like the whole loaf in one
Yeah,
day.
she could. She really could. We'll talk to you when we're starting to read Alice. Hello. I'm a little sleepy because we were laying out in the sun reading, and so I feel like I'm a little slow, like I'm moving in slow motion. I definitely am not as captivated as I was with Hooked. I feel like Hooked, not only the romance aspect, but like maybe the writing style was a little faster. Everything about it was faster, and so I feel like it was easier for me to get into it. This one is definitely feeling a little slower, and I don't dislike it. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad book by any means. I think it's just slower than I was expecting for it to be. Hopefully it picks up, because otherwise I could see myself napping. We're gonna keep chugging. Hopefully the next time we talk to you, we're done. Hi guys. So it's the next day and we ended up finishing Alice late last night. We were dog sitting this whole past weekend, and so late last night after we got home from dog sitting, we just finished it on our phones, just like reading in bed. And I'm glad I had that time to sit on it, because my review has changed from what I was originally thinking, giving it a 3.5. Thinking about it, it really isn't just average. I did enjoy it. I think the problem was that I didn't go into it without any preconceived like notion or without any like expectations, which was my bad. I don't want to go into a book like having an idea of how I want it to go and then rate it poorly because it didn't match with what I thought it was going to be. Because obviously that's not me judging it based off of what the author is doing. That's just me being kind of upset that I didn't get it the way I wanted it to, you know what I'm saying? So I'm giving it a 3.5. I really liked the like twist of the world, and I thought that it was interesting. Definitely really dark, so if you're not trying to read any sort of like dark content, I wouldn't recommend it, and there are definitely trigger warnings that you should look up. So I feel like that's the same for both of these books that we read, that the trigger warnings were high, and just books that I don't recommend for everyone. I always say to look into things, especially if you feel like you're the type of person that needs to look into things. I always recommend that you do, just because I don't want to forget to say a trigger and that end up being something you needed to know, you know? So always, no matter what, always look into books that get recommended to you if you think that that's something that you need. Either way, I really like this book. Now looking back on it, again, I really just felt like what I had in my mind didn't match And it was also kind of slow, but I think because I've read so many fantasies that are like go, 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 I don't get to appreciate when the book is slow. And not even like slow in like a bad way, but just more atmospheric, or where the stakes aren't as high or they don't feel as high. I feel like I immediately assume if it's more of like a cozy read, which I wouldn't call this a cozy read by any means, but a read that's more about the journey rather than there being like this huge crazy plot line, if that makes sense. I feel like I immediately assumed that the writing style isn't as good or the book wasn't as good, but it just gave something else. So if you're looking for a twist on an original tale that is dark, for sure, very dark, but it was a little anticlimactic, which is what keeps me from rating it anything higher than a 3.5, because it was a little anticlimactic. I did feel like every time that we got to like a big boss scenario, that the way that they got through it was less than I expected, or it was resolved rather quickly, which I wasn't expecting anything too in-depth because it really isn't that big of a book. All in all, I'm glad that we read these stories. I feel like it's always fun to get the retelling or the fractured fairy tale, whatever the case may be. I feel like it's interesting to see what someone does with someone else's work, and what they pull from it and what they found interesting, because I feel like it just shows like what they took from the original piece. The things that I might have taken from the original Alice in Wonderland are different from what this author took, or any retelling, which I just find so interesting because, I mean, obviously you know that each person reads a book differently, but it's very obvious to see what they took when they do retellings like this, and you could see like, oh, that character stood out to you enough to write in your book, like that detail stood out to you enough to change it, or whatever, you know. So I find it very interesting. I think I liked Hooked because it kind of got propelled forward with the romance, and this didn't have like a real romance. Like there was a little bit of one, but it was more of like a subplot, so I feel like that was another reason that this wasn't as like quick as Hooked was. But I definitely like the world better of this than Hooked, because Hooked wasn't fantasy and this was. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you so much, and